Hi, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at a pattern. And the pattern that we're going to be using is called a matchstick pattern. And I have that pattern here demonstrated to our left. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an algebraic rule for our pattern. And what this rule is going to do is it's going to help us find numbers later on in our pattern. So what our pattern is going to look like later on. So right now, what we need to start doing is creating a table. And in our table, we're going to have the number of squares on our left side and the number of toothpicks that create these squares on our right. So what I have one square, and then I have 2 squares, and then I have 2, 3 squares. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down on my left column. So now what I need to find is the number of toothpicks that are in each square. So for my 1 square, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 toothpicks. For my 2 squares, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 toothpicks. And for my 3 squares, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10. And so what I notice when I look at my table is that on my right side, my numbers seem to be going up by 3. I know that 4 plus 3 is 7, and 7 plus 3 is 10. So I wonder, what's my 4th term? Because I know with patterns that if something's happening, it's going to continue to happen each and every time. So if I'm going up by 3, I know that to get my 4th term, I can continue doing that. So I know that 10 plus 3 is 13. And that means that there are 13 toothpicks if I would create 4 squares. So I know that I could do that, and I know that that's just fine to do that, to go up by 3 each and every time in order to get to the number that you want to get to, the number of squares which you're looking for. But I know something that will make this so much easier, and that is to find our rule. Because what if I wanted to find the 20th term? If I wanted to find the 20th term, I would have to find the 19th term. And to find the 19th, I'd have to find the 18th, and so on and so on. So to make this easier for myself, I'm going to create a rule. And in order to do this, I'm going to break up these numbers. And I'm going to look at 4 first. And I know that I can break up 4 into 1 plus 3. And you know what? I did this on purpose because I know that I have 1 plus 3 here, but I'm adding another 3. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. 1 plus 3 plus 3. And I can do the same thing for a third 3 squares. I have 1 plus 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I know that I can write that down this way. Alright, so let's look at this for a second. What I see groups of 3. So I'm going to go ahead and underline those groups of 3. And you know what? Let's write this down. I have 1 group of 3 plus 1, because that's what I have here, 1 group of 3 plus 1. Here, I have 2 groups of 3 plus 1. So let's go ahead and write that. I got 2 groups of 3 plus 1. Let's see, okay. So now I have 3 groups of 3 plus 1. Alright, and I know when I hear groups, I know that this is the same as multiplication. And multiplication and putting things into groups are something that I am comfortable with and I have done in the past. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this different mathematical concept to find my pattern rule. So let's go ahead and write this as if we were writing a multiplication sentence. We have 3 times 1 plus 1. And the reason it's this way is because I have one group of 3. I have one group of 3. Okay, here I have 3 times 2 plus 1 because I have 2 groups of 3 plus my 1. Alright, and here I have 3 groups of 3 plus 1. And you know what I'm noticing? I'm noticing that these numbers right here, which tell us how many groups of 3 we have, those match the number of squares. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create my rule. I now know that 3 times the number of squares, so here I have 1 square, 2 square, 3 squares, number of squares which I want to know, plus 1 will equal to the number of toothpicks that I would like to find. So let's say I want to find how many toothpicks are in 20 squares. So if I wanted to jump down to the 20 sets of squares, how many toothpicks would I have? And because I've created my rule, I know that I can plug in 20 into my S. So let's look. I have 3 plus 20 plus 1. Because I plugged in the 20 for the number of squares. And I know that gives me 61. So what this tells me is that if I have 20 squares, there will be 61 toothpicks in those squares. And I found that out by using my rule. My rule which says that 3 times the number of squares plus 1 will give me the number of toothpicks. Alright, so now that we've found our 20th term, I want us to go back and check to make sure that this rule is correct. So you know how I'm going to do that? I'm going to go ahead and plug in our 4 because we found out by using our pattern that 4 is going to have 13 toothpicks. So if our rule is correct, we know that when we plug in 4 for the number of squares, we should get 13. So let's see if this works. If I have my equation, which is 3 times the number of squares, which in this case is 4, plus 1, this should give us 13. So let's see. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So we know that our rule is correct. And we know that we could use our rule to find any number boxes that we would like, and it will fit into our pattern. So thank you very much. This lesson can be used is appropriate for 4th grade. Kids start learning patterns starting in kindergarten, but they don't start creating this rule until they hit about 4th grade, and they expand on that as they go up. But this lesson would be grade appropriate at 4th grade. So, thank you.